to serve on the planning committee for this week of celebration that was led so ably by Marcellus Cummings. And this is where we pay homage to the legacy and the principles of Dr. King for a whole week. Our theme this year is the journey of justice, moving beyond diversity. My task this evening is to explain the purpose of our annual Reverend Martin Luther King commemorative celebration. Now, why do we organize these events every year? What are our goals? First, we must never forget that this is a commemorative celebration. Therefore, our first objective and purpose is to remember and recall what Dr. King did and spread that knowledge and history. Dr. Martin Luther King, as the unquestioned preeminent leader of the civil rights movement in this country in the late 1950s and early 1960s, had a transformational impact on this country. Under his leadership, restrooms, buses, planes, theaters, stores, and schools were desegregated, voting rights were expanded, and important employment protections and avenues for redress were set forth in federal legislation. Because of this, he was awarded the 1964 Nobel Peace Prize, honored with a national holiday, voted in by Congress, and a memorial on the Mall in Washington, D.C. that opened in 2011, the first to honor a man of color. He stood for loving one another, as he put it, not some weak and sentimental kind of love, but an all-embracing and unconditional love for all mankind, even those who opposed him. This is necessary, he said, because we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality tied in a single garment of destiny. He stood for peace and peaceful nonviolent protest. He also stood for justice and confronting barriers to his ultimate goal of seeing equal opportunity as a reality for everyone, regardless of race, creed, or gender. Now, many students and others were not alive when King led the civil rights movement and may not have been taught in your schools about the discriminatory practices that the movement sought to change, the principles underlying the techniques, the sacrifices and the lives lost, and the positive results achieved. So recalling this history is a critical purpose, and while we can't share all of it, we can spark a curiosity and a yearning to learn more. So this year, in addition to whatever's printed on our website and other places, we had a gallery of photos. Those are some of them back here to my left, displayed that show photos from different phases of his civil rights journey. And this displayed on easels with accompanying audio, excerpts from Dr. King's speeches to stimulate recollection and learning. We also sponsored an art contest and an essay contest to induce students to reflect on the meaning of his life for them and for their future. Finally, we're showing the film King in the Wilderness that reveals how King navigated conflicts and criticism in his social justice journey. Our second objective and purpose is in fact to celebrate and honor the progress that the movement toward justice made under his leadership, and the examples of courage and sacrifice left by Dr. King and the thousands of followers of all creeds, colors, and ages. On January 17th, the University of Houston joined with the larger community in the city's annual parade to celebrate Martin Luther King. There were over 100 entrants. We had a float with 22 students who joined the thousands in attendance. And today we celebrate through music provided by the Good News Gospel Choir, because such music often sustained, fortified, and consoled the civil rights activists. We honor them today, especially those justice soldiers who lost their lives in the battle that unfortunately is not yet over. Indeed, many of the hills that were claimed by these warriors have to be reclaimed. They knew freedom is not free and were willing to risk it all. They also knew that future generations would have to protect and reclaim it as well. And so the celebration this year in particular has somewhat of a bittersweet quality to it because there is so much left to do, some of it to do over. Our final purpose for organizing these events is to challenge listeners, participants, you in the audience out there. Since Dr. King also stood for service, each year we invite members of the campus community to engage in activities that improve the larger community or the lives of others with our annual day of service. While these activities may prime the pump, we hope this year, that we all allow ourselves to think of much larger issues that match our current challenges. Catastrophic climate change, extreme health and economic disparities, entrenched racial discrimination, bitter partisan division, dysfunctional civic discourse, real threats to our democratic foundation, attacks on the right to vote, the rise of hate groups and militias, public talk of civil war, soaring murder rates across the country, frequent gun attacks against innocent people at schools, churches, synagogues, and even unprovoked attacks on police officers. Student debt that is crushing many dreams, unprecedented new limitations on what we can say or teach. A criminal justice court system that still needs more justice. Our purpose and aspirations this year are that we all think of moving beyond diversity toward justice in the broadest terms. Though these challenges are great, we know that when young people, and those young at heart, act collectively on a moral issue, change comes. We hope our celebration will stimulate you to ask, what would Martin Luther King Jr. do? But more importantly, what can I do? Recalling that young people have most often been the real engines of change when they decide change is necessary. It was young people who started the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Council that worked so effectively with Dr. King. In Houston, it was college students that sat in at a lunch counter just a few blocks from where we are on March 4th, 1960, having been admonished not to go down there by their teachers and elders. Young people led the anti-Vietnam movement. It was young people who started Black Lives Matter and marches all over the world in the aftermath of the George Floyd murder. So, recall the MLK principles of love and nonviolence. Remember and borrow from the past techniques, good trouble, boycotts, marches, persuasive communication. Never forget that though he dreamed, he spent his last days fighting for economic equity for sanitation workers so that they could have enough money to buy food in restaurants that he helped desegregate. And finally, and this is my last point, innovate and invent your own strategies for these new and old challenges. Be the change you see. For all these purposes, we have organized this commemoration celebration for the week and for tonight. Thank you very much. Now, Miriam Alford, the Vice President for the Student Government Association, will introduce our featured speaker for tonight.